We are live.
Okay, live Senate Appropriations, April 11th. We're going over FY26 budget mainly, but we're taking a break on that to talk about H13. It came out of Senate Health and Welfare. We could have, Jen will be here shortly. She could walk us through it, or you could tell us
I'll just say
about it.
briefly, it's really an analysis of rates appropriate for community-based services. And so the details about what is needed to look at community-based services, costs of any costs. So it's a total cost analysis for community services and how much they should be receiving for their work.
Is it
I
a
think
strike all amendment?
It is not a strike-all amendment. We took out the word home and just left in community-based services, because there's a difference between the types of services that are offered when you say home and.
It is a strikeout. I'm looking at your amendment.
Yeah, it's a strike-all, but the struck-out sections are really pretty minimal
Okay.
for the bill.
Let's cover you.
It's really a study. Where's
You want to
Jen?
hear from Jen?
Here she is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reporter is Senator Bulick, but we're probably good right here.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Jen Perry from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So you are looking, I believe, at H13, an act relating to Medicaid payment rates for, and as the bill currently reads, it's home and community-based service providers. The amendment would change that to just community-based service providers, not actually changing the scope, but because home and community-based services is a well-known and defined term under Medicaid law. There was a request from the Agency of Human Services to use a different term since the definition is broader than home and community-based services in the traditional Medicaid context. So the bill adds a new definition in the chapter on healthcare facility rate setting for community-based services, and it's a number of different services provided pursuant to the Vermont's Global Commitment to Health Medicaid demonstrations, with services provided under our Medicaid waiver demonstration. I don't know if you want me to go into the details of what those are.
No.
Okay. So then section 2 adds a new section on payment rates for providers of community-based services, and it requires the Secretary of the Agency of Human Services, AHS, to determine payment rates for providers of community-based services that are reasonable and adequate to achieve the required outcomes for the population they serve. It directs the Secretary to take certain factors into account when determining the rates, come up with a methodology for determining rates that includes conducting rate studies of Medicaid rates to these providers at least once every 5 years for each provider type, sets out a predictable timeline for redetermining base rates, includes process for an annual inflationary rate adjustment, and other factors. Also requires the Secretary to establish a process for a community-based services provider to seek extraordinary relief from the agency if its financial condition puts it at imminent risk of closure. And then the important part for this committee is that, in particular, is that the bill would require the AHS Secretary to redetermine the payment rates at least annually and report them and the amounts necessary to fund them to legislative committees of jurisdiction, including this committee, so that you have that information when you are working on the budget. So it would be as part of their budget presentation.
So, and the last time this was done, we have some language and some funds in the budget that brings some of our community-based services up to 2023 levels. The goal is to bring them up where they belong based on economics.
Right. I mean, what the bill would do is provide information about what the rates, based on the factors that are set out in the legislation, what the rates should be and how much it would cost to fund them, but it does not actually require them to be funded at that rate unless the legislature appropriates the funds. But when you get requests annually from folks asking you for increases to different amounts, you may not know where they should be in relation to what is being requested, but this would provide that information. Section 3 kind of makes a conforming change. There's some similar language in existing statute for designated and specialized service agencies. This bill would include them in that definition of community-based services in Title 33. So so it amends the Title 18 provision to basically say, go look to the Title 33 provision for the rate determinations for designated and specialized service agencies. Section 4 requires AHS to report to the policy committees by January with an update on their implementation of those rate determinations, including the proposed schedule for the Medicaid rate studies and the methodology for determining payment rates and the act to expect on passage. So it does not actually spend money, but it may create some expectations around money to be spent in the future.
Kind of like the reach out report we were looking for. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any questions, Ms. Carter? Nolan, do you want to tell us anything about the fiscal note?
Sure.
Although I do have, I guess Jen, I do have one question, and
Yes.
that is, in the bill, there's language about a study on community-based services. Not their rates, but on their services they're providing. I don't know if you looked at that language
In this bill or in
in the budget.
Nolan brought it to my attention earlier today. I'm not aware of it. I'm not sure where it comes from or what it's looking to do that is similar or different to this.
Okay.
I don't know.
I pulled that language.
And I consulted with my colleague who works on human services, more on the human services side. She didn't draft the language either, so we don't.
Okay.
We are not.
Because it was in the House bill. The House put that language in there. But I wondered
Talking
if,
about a reach-up study?
no, there's language in the bill.
Emily, are you familiar with that language around the community-based organization report?
The
Section
definitions
E100.
are, I mean, they're not the same or necessarily. There may
Right.
be some overlap, but there's a lot of.
Yeah, I wondered if
Different.
there was enough overlap that they needed to be combined in any way, or if it's problematic that the agency is doing two reports that are not connected that overlap.
In the H13.
It does say
setting up
community, it is very similar, isn't it?
Well, no, one's structure of funding and the
Oh,
other one is
yeah,
Right.
how much rates would have to go up.
But it
They are
also
two different
says
things.
that.
yeah, it's different.
Organizations may include area agencies on aging, community action agencies, designated agencies, and parent-child
Parent
centers. So I would
child
say
centers.
designated agencies are really the only one that actually show up in
Oh,
H13
Right.
and in designated and specialized service agencies. So I don't know that Medicaid funding applies to many of those other ones. I don't think they're.
You know what I'll do is
program.
I will reach out to House folks and try to get a sense of why that language is in there with the return on it. Report back.
yeah, because if there's a way we adjust one of the two, we'll probably pass H13, but
Well, but if this fits with it, might be worth a conversation.
yeah.
I'm not, yeah, I mean, I think it's important, I think it would be important to understand from the Agency of Human Services how they see these working together, assuming they're aware of the budget language. And this also has Secretary of Administration
Good catch.
doing that study.
Yeah, but which they say don't make us do extended.
But most of these,
Sure.
H13 is all about Medicaid rates.
Yeah,
I don't believe most of these other entities are funded at least largely by
so it's just the
Medicaid.
DAs.
Right, I'm not familiar enough with the others to know, but the area agencies on aging, for example, I don't believe provide Medicaid funded services to, Medicaid beneficiaries. I think they
Well,
provide a number of services. I'm not entirely sure what their funding model looks like, but I don't see it as a service.
What section is that in?
E1, it's E100.
Page 120 of this little.
Page, I forgot.
E100?
Page 31. Page 31. What I'll do is I will circle back with the House and try to understand the relationship, what they were thinking, and get a better understanding.
I'm wondering if, because I noticed that, for example, the CAPS are in here, and then the parent-child centers and the area agencies on aging. And I think that some of the asks we heard this morning in our committee were suggestions that their budget requests were not in. I can't say that whether they are or not, but I remember the CAPS for CBOEO saying they needed $500,000 for expenses going forward. So maybe it's a combination of organizations that weren't fully funded. I mean,
I don't know, because the DAs are, and some of the AAAs are in 2%. Community actions outside of that, because it's not a different type of organization. So let me do some research and report back to you.
Right, you might want, to talk to the agency too, because I did ask them about it.
It's starting to come back to me a little bit.
I haven't heard back from them, but I did ask them about it and what they thought about it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this came from a House Appropriations.
Because we could do an amendment of H13 if we wanted to put the whole study in the budget, or we could put the whole study in H13, take it out in one.
Whatever you want to do.
The H13 one is an ongoing.
Yeah.
Is ongoing.
It's
annual.
Right.
And statutory is supposed to a one-time study.
Or you can hold off voting on 13, I can have an answer for you by Tuesday.
Right, you're not in a hurry, you can get it out.
Right, and we did hold that open yesterday, didn't we?
Right, okay. Fiscal note?
As for this bill, as Jen mentioned, the bill requires AHS to determine reasonable and adequate rates for community-based providers, DAs, and SSAs. It requires AHS to establish a process for providers whose financial condition places them at risk of closure to seek extraordinary financial relief. However, it neither requires AHS to increase rates nor provide extraordinary financial relief. And additionally, there is no appropriation for rate increases or extraordinary financial relief in the bill. Therefore, the bill would not have a financial impact. In short, it does these rate studies, but doesn't require you to increase the rates that comes up with.
Right.
So
it
sets the stage by saying, here's how much you have to, here's how much it would cost to increase the rates, but it doesn't actually require you to do the rates.
But it could set up they'll come in and say, this is what the study said, so you should raise it.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks for doing a short fiscal note.
I like short ones.
Yeah. Okay. Are folks okay, are you center lines that if we do hold off voting for it?
Yeah.
Get more information on this,
Yeah,
how the
let's
two
do it.
things work
May as well
together?
do everything at once.
Okay. So we'll move on that. Emily Byrne. Yeah. The backup fund. That's why.
Perfect.
Could let Jen buy first.
Yeah.
So there's a slideshow from Emily on the website.
Elle, did you send me?
I did, it's in your calendar, it's updated.
I'm not gonna talk about the bananas.
But you're here to listen to what?
No, so, not on here.
Okay.
You are.
No, we are
No,
on
you're not on here.
Okay,
I'm hiding out from this.
okay, good.
Well, Sunday's my birthday, they want to do a cake, so.
You gotta
When
hide.
is your birthday?
Sunday.
Oh.
We won't tell them.
Because you're not too bananas on this thing.
I mean, the tobacco bud is
Find you here,
bananas,
the
but.
cake will end up here too.
Oh,
Oh, yes, from here.
I will. I'm hoping to leave traces, maybe they'll carry it down.
Yeah.
Could add it. this falls.
Yeah.
We could have one on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Retrospective cases.
All right, so Emily, for the record, Emily Burns, the Joint Fiscal Office. I have a quick presentation about the Tobacco Settlement Fund.
Do you think Westman is not here on purpose? This presentation is for him. Not for him.
You can watch the tape after the fact.
Yeah, we'll
Right.
make it one.
So anyway, I gave this presentation in the House Committee, when they were sort of at a similar stage in their budget development, just to sort of level set on where the tobacco fund is, what it's used for, a little bit of history around it. But so the tobacco fund itself is funded through the Master Settlement Agreement. Back in 1998, 52 states and territories signed the Master Settlement Agreement with the big tobacco companies. And I should clarify, I'm not an expert on the Master Settlement Agreement. I don't know the details of the Master Settlement Agreement. That's more of that information. The Attorney General is who to talk to on that. But sort of generally, there was a settlement with the tobacco companies. The money that came from the settlement, the sort of purpose of which is supposed to be used to reduce smoking rates in the United States. And part of the settlement is that the tobacco manufacturers make annual payments to states when they sell cigarettes in the U.S. This is just like an overview of the master settlement payments that the state has received since the start of the settlement back in 1999. And what the projections are for fiscal year 26 and 27. When they gave this presentation in the House, we didn't have the final 2025 number. The master settlement agreement payments are made in April. So at the beginning of this month, we got the sort of final payments.
What are they based on? Why would it go up?
So I believe the sort of like big spike is they sort of relitigated some prior year payments, and states were owed additional money. So there's conversations about this, and every once in a while there's like an extra, something changes. Again, I don't want to get way into stuff that I'm not sure of, but I think everybody in the country sort of got a big extra slug of money in this sort of 2018.
Does that dry up sooner or later? Is there
I don't think
10
so. I
days?
think
No?
it's
Keeps going.
You
and
just
it's
put it on
tied
slow.
to like cigarette sales nationally, not within the state. So like
So that's why it'll change.
Mhm.
So as cigarette sales go down, it'll go down.
Yes.
And it's just cigarettes or just tobacco?
I don't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah, okay.
But so I believe there's a percentage, like the Vermont gets a percentage of total sales. It's not tied to what's necessarily sold in the state.
Right.
So, you know, it has been going down, but it gets finalized by, every year what the amount's gonna be. So if we look at, this is just a comparison of FY 2024 compared to FY 2025, and it says budget adjustment because there was a $3 million in the budget last year. There was a transfer of $3 million out of the tobacco fund. That in the budget, both iterations of the budget adjustment, that $3 billion was not gonna be transferred out of the tobacco fund. And so I left this as likely what will happen in the FY 2026 budget, to the extent you integrate stuff that was in the budget adjustment act into the budget bill. So it eliminates that $3 million transfer out. But this is on the top, you have, the master settlement agreement payment, any interest owed to the fund, and then any prior year balance. So in FY 24, there was $16 million of prior year funds in the tobacco fund for a total of $41 million of available funds in FY 24. The total appropriations were $25 million. So at the end of FY 24, that left projected $15 million in the fund. The sort of things to note are, most of this money is going to B301, which is the mixing bowl appropriation for Medicaid. So most of this money is used as Medicaid match. There's a little bit of money that goes to the Attorney General's office because they are paying attention to the Master Settlement Agreement to make sure that the amounts that the state is owed get paid. Some funds for the Agency of Education for tobacco cessation in schools. I think liquor and lottery did some enforcement, related to tobacco sales.
Where do you think the schools one was?
In 501, the education and education services line. And then there's programs at the health department and substance use. And the health department should speak specifically to those. There were some one-time appropriations in Act 185 and Act 178, and then in Act 11. Act 11 of 2018 is what often gets referred to as the CHINS money. And so that money is set aside, I believe judiciary is who spends it down to fund a judge. And so that money is sort of obligated until it is liquidated. So that $3 million is sort of spoken for, pending other action by the General Assembly, but that is sort of set aside for that purpose. So at the end of FY 2025, it's anticipated that there will only be $10 million remaining in the tobacco fund. So then if we go into FY 26, that's FY 25. So the FY 25 column is the same, and then this one adds FY 26 to it. So the projected master settlement agreement revenue in FY 26, and this is, based on the work that I think the Attorney General's office does, they're anticipating Vermont will get $18.5 million. Prior year funds is, instead of 15, is only $10 million, so there's $28 million worth of revenue, and $24 million of projected expenses, which leaves only, and they've eliminated some of those sort of one-time appropriations go away, but so that leaves a balance of $4.1 million. So we sort of continue on this trajectory of less revenue and expenses, appropriations kind of being leveled from where they were in the past. Sort of punchline, right? So in FY 27, it's projected to only have $18.67 million come into the tobacco fund. 17 of that will be settlement funds, and 1.4 is projected to be sort of prior year balance money as they sort of like revisit what the payments were. And so in FY 26, the base appropriations are $24.5 million. If you have the exact same appropriations from FY 26, in FY 27, that will leave a deficit in the tobacco fund in FY 27 of $5.8 million. You will recall there was a projected $4.1 million of prior year balance. So you can use some of that sort of one-time prior year balance to help shore up the tobacco fund, but it still will leave a deficit in the tobacco fund in FY 27 of $1.75 million.
And isn't that, on your chart in the beginning, the projected for 27 was 17 million.
Right, that's I think that's the settlement money, and then there's that prior year balance.
Right. And some assume you would have interest.
There would be a little bit of interest.
You just have it as zero, because we don't know what.
We don't know what it is.
Senator Watson?
I think I am not understanding why, it's, in terms of how this fund works, it seems like the kinds of programs that are funded by it, I guess what I'm not understanding is why this would run a deficit. Like, why wouldn't you cut the programs to match the influx of money? Does that make sense?
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's what would have to happen in FY 27.
Okay, because, yeah.
So to the extent
To
there's
avoid the deficit.
To avoid the deficit,
Yeah.
yes. So to the extent there's been, this prior year balance available, it's being used and it's being set aside so that it can be used, like it's not using it all at once, right? Like it's there to kind of slow the issue down, like to, so you can keep sort of status quo for a while. But yes, at some point, likely FY 27, something will have to be reduced.
So, because we're good with 26.
Yeah.
Because we still have a balance, but then if we had the same level of spending in 27, that
You're
would
in the
work.
hole.
That would work.
Okay. Yeah, and I think to the extent, right, and so like, yes, there is one-time money available in the tobacco fund right now, but to the extent you spend any of that in FY 26, it will just make the hole bigger in FY 27.
I'll have to find other things to cut.
Yes.
Yeah. And the global commitment, is that an estimate, or does that change, or is it always going to be 2149?
That is what has historically been appropriated to the Global Commitment Fund. I think if and when there was a change in available funds, right, there would be the biggest appropriation is obviously that appropriation. And that would be one option, is to reduce the amount of tobacco funds available for Medicaid match. Versus
I'm
looking at.
assuming that $21 million is being matched, right, by
Yes.
public commitment
Yep,
for just general health programs, not, because you can just use it for any program, it doesn't have to be related to tobacco.
right, it's, yeah, Medicaid match is a
Depends on,
allowable use, so right, it goes into the mixing bowl and then goes out and the sort of,
So it's kind of has the same impact as general fund, it's just, we're just using it to meet that match.
Mhm.
All the other ones, that B200, 501, 236, how, is that by formula? Is it broken up by formula, or is they just decide every year how much to put forward? Because it has changed a little bit.
Mhm. So, and I think it probably depends on whether or not, so like, I'll use the Attorney General for an example. There's positions that do this work,
Right, that's
those
pretty
positions
static.
are funded, so right, like, every year there's
Yeah,
changes in salaries and benefits, so that amount would increase commensurately. I don't know, that may be what's going on, you know,
like education services went from 480 to 750 between FY24 and 25.
yes, and I can't remember why, I can find out why that changed, I think there was a decision to put more.
Is that a legislative, or is it like the tobacco, somebody else is deciding how to divide it up on these, or all these numbers are always in the statute?
Yeah, they're always in the
In
budget.
the budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
And so for the proposal that Westman was talking about having $500,000 go for cessation programs for pregnant Vermonters, that would be, we would decide which line item to take it out of. Basically, right? So we'd say education service doesn't need 750, or they don't get 750, they only get 250. Yeah. Okay, Senator Lott.
yeah, so, and I'm gonna get to that one, but so the use of the funds, really, the intention is to reduce, chronic illnesses associated with tobacco use ultimately. So having, investment in, upstream programs to prevent use and to then reduce chronic illnesses, I think is really critical. And so if you look at what's not in the budget this time with, Act 185, removal of the Department of Health tobacco prevention dollars seems to be contrary to what the fund should be used for, my opinion. Well, don't have to agree with me. And then, if you look, if we think about the liquor and lottery program that is doing so much better because of the strong investment in betting, that maybe there's a way to shift some of those funds going forward. Because I think what Senator Westman and what others have been talking about in having a program at parent-child centers to prevent maternal smoking and to keep kids from having their pretty deleterious effects from tobacco, that we might be able to find money by just sorting out some of those shifts around.
Some of the shifts.
Yeah, so I'm thinking liquor and lottery, I don't know what else, so certainly,
What is the com part of the liquor and lottery line?
I don't know what that means.
Is that for
Communication.
communications, like outreach and education?
Commissioner's office. Liquor and Lottery Commissioner's office.
Okay. And do we have our funding liquor and lottery?
I think it's
office out of
enforcement
tobacco?
related.
Oh, they do the ID checks, I remember now. In the substance use programs, could be prevention,
Mhm.
right? We don't know
Yeah.
exactly what that is.
Yeah.
But what we don't know is what's in the education services.
Well, probably going into schools and, I forget the title. 3QX, what is it?
Yeah,
OVX. The OVX program for kids, it really is a very effective program, preventing tobacco use, smoking.
so if we wanted to move $500,000 into a new program, we'd have to line it up to one of these sections.
I mean, you could give tobacco funds to a different section, I think it would be,
If you create a new section, but you'd have to reduce it, or you put it in deficit.
or you put it into further deficit.
I mean, I guess, yeah, or we could just say, you could create a new line, there wouldn't be a deficit next year, but there would be a larger deficit in 27 that somebody else would have to figure out.
Which I believe will be this committee, because it will be the same way.
Well, 27 might be a whole new, could be new members.
Well, the 27 budget will be this committee next
Oh, that's right.
year.
In 27, but
Yeah.
27. Okay,
And I did a quick look at AOE, the tobacco money is granted to school districts for individual schools to run tobacco cessation programs.
in the substance use programs, is that all substance use? You know,
I'm not sure about the substance, but the health department does.
or the public health? Okay,
They could answer that question.
any other questions? Ms. Byrne? Okay, this is just to help us as we think about that appropriation request for the parent-child centers to have this information. Anything else you want to tell us, Emily?
I don't know tobacco fund.
Okay, so that's the backup plan. Now we're gonna move to our next item.
Yeah.
Are you gonna do that on the screen, or we have handouts?
We have handouts, and I told Elle that I would give them out to control the.
Control the
world
narrative.
Yeah. One, so that we know which spreadsheet. we're
Yeah,
all-
center line.
When she gets settled. Well, I just, for clarification's sake, you know, as I'm going through some, information relative to my part of the budget, and then we're taking testimony in our committee on different asks. And we've gone through the language in the big bill, but just because we check something off doesn't mean we're checking it off permanently. Because there's some things that I have discovered that I think we should pay attention to going
The
forward.
closed shall be open and the open shall be closed.
How biblical.
Never the twin.
Anyway. Just one sheet, right?
Well, she's controlling the other sheet to keep you interested in what's gonna happen. She already has.
Yeah, that's kind of.
Was there any change in this draft version then? Okay,
So I'm gonna share it, so folks at home can follow along.
Is this just like this other sheet that we had, just with more columns?
Yes,
yeah,
it should look familiar, so this is
and
the
other update.
I believe this is the first version that we've looked at that has the Senate column filled out. Give me 1 second to share this, and then I will preface this. So, we've walked through this sheet before, in terms of what the House's budget looks like. So this one has a column for the governor, a column for the House, the next column is the difference between the House and the governor, and then we filled in the Senate column. So we did when we filled in the Senate column, so this is, Amy and I's best, trying to follow along, the decisions that were being made. I'm not really sure why it's yellow and then it turns orange, but it's kind of cool. But it's all supposed to be orange to try to, but the orange colors are either things that have changed or have been added, and we can walk through each of them. We tried to put some notes in blue where to notate the decisions that were made, but it's not necessarily supposed to be comprehensive of everything. If you find things that we've missed or that we caught incorrectly, we'll update them for next week. But the ones where there were sort of open questions on, we have filled in I will say, we filled in the highest position, the one that would cost the most, to just sort of show us the, like, if you go with, spending
I
the
mean, in
most, this is sort
the,
of
in
where
the
you
Senate
would be.
column, you took the high, between the House and the governor, you took the higher one.
Unless it was clear from the conversations that you've had that you were going with the House position, or not, so,
Okay.
I can walk quickly through some of these, and what has been added, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Great, so up at the top, we don't have anything changing, and that's because the base budget is the base budget, we're not changing anything with pay act. And then, or the pensions and the base transfers, are not changing at this point. That is a place where probably next week we should look at what those transfers are and make sure that you agree with what those are. But the biggest transfer in that $100 million is the $80 million to the pension fund, or not the pension, excuse me, the debt service fund.
Did you want to fix the rounding in line one?
is that not
Yes.
that month, the transfer to the education fund?
That shows up in one-time transfers.
Okay.
So the base ones are,
Oh, base transfer.
quickly wrap.
No, that's fine. I got it.
The big one is the, debt service. And I close prescription,
Yeah.
I can't route it.
Yeah, debt service 81.
Yeah. Okay, so then if we go to the appropriations pieces, in the Attorney General's office, there was conversation about adding a position, so the House added one position for the pre-charge program. In the budget, the first version of the budget adjustment, there was an additional position in the Solicitor General's office, for $150,000, so another $150 has been added here, and then another $80,000 for a home repair fraud coordinator. I don't know if there's any other comments on that, but that's been added in. And then on line 6 in B201, in the pre-charge diversion, there was some discussion about adding $600,000 for, to expand the pre-charge diversion to the counties that are ready to do this. I believe that was Franklin and Plum, thank you. So there's an additional 600,000 there.
So we're pretty sure that just does those two towns?
I think it more than.
There will be, it'll move the whole rest of the state. Those two counties happen to be ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah,
But the 600 is enough for all the counties?
that's what we've heard.
Okay.
Yeah, the statewide is supposed to be enough, so they're requesting.
Okay, on the next line, this may actually be a technical one that JFO needs to look into based on some conversations I've had with the judiciary. But it looks like there was a reduction made of $216,000 to the judiciary for the revenue replacement for the tech fund. And I think the understanding in the House was that this could be reduced so long as the budget adjustment passed, but I think there's some confusion around whether or not the budget adjustment, first, the budget adjustment hasn't passed yet, so that's not the question. The second part is, confusion around that the budget adjustment doesn't adjust the base budget, that we go from base to base, not from budget adjustment to base, so there may have been an correction we may have taken money out of the base that we shouldn't have, that they need in both fiscal years. So we'll look into that and let you know if that's what the implications of that change are on the House side, but that may need to be looked at further. No change on the security services COLA at the judiciary. We did not make any changes specifically related to what I believe was being referred to as the Norris proposal for state's attorneys and sheriffs, but this leaves the amount that the House had in the budget, the $1.3 million, but we can update this based on what you want to do there.
I do have one question, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm looking at 8.1, which is remove the vacancy savings, compared to line 9, the transport deputies, we come up with a $650,000 in it, and I'm looking in the red. Is this both the state's attorneys and sheriffs are requesting the $650,000 vacancy savings. Do we find that anywhere in here for the state's attorneys and sheriffs? Because it's not going to cost $650,000 for the transport deputies.
So, and I think the line 8.1
Yep.
is supposed to be for the state's attorneys.
Well, this is the state's attorneys. Okay.
Yeah, and then line 9, B207 is the sheriff's. So I can update the notes, make that clear.
Thank you.
Right, so does it go to the sheriffs, or does it go to the state's attorneys and sheriff's office, and then they distribute it to the sheriff? Or do those transport deputies work for the individual sheriffs, or do they work for SAS?
It all goes through SAS. However, they have two budgets, for the lack of a better term. One is for the sheriffs, one's for the SAS, the state's attorneys.
Okay, so moving on to line 10, the JTOC transfer, except the keeping where the house was and getting rid of the T-fund transfer to the general fund, leaving in $500,000 for the radio equipment, public safety. Then we have highlighted as more conversations and decisions on the money for the school safety center.
I can tell you what that is. If you
Oh,
want to know.
great, that's what we were wondering.
Okay, so in conversations with many members of the Department of Public Safety, there's a present position where Captain D. Barbic held, okay, and they were using this position because Rob Evans, another ex-trooper, was actually contracted through Margot and Healy for the Alice project and many other projects there. They're fading away from that, and they want to, this money is going to be used for another position within to continue the school safety program, is what they're earmarking this for.
So this is personnel costs for the school safety program?
Yes.
Line 12.
Yeah.
12, yes. And if they're watching, I'm sure they'll text me and correct me on everything, so.
Okay, so on line 13, the funding for the cameras. We heard that we want to leave that in as is. The next line 14, the firearm replacement. We have that one highlighted as there was open questions on that line item.
It's part of the Norris proposal.
It's going to be.
Okay,
The $5,000 for the grant administrator at Vermont Emergency Management, or for the hazard mitigation grants manager, still in. We had an open question on the additional funding for emergency food at Department of Public Safety for $500,000.
That's, I can respond briefly to that one. if
yeah,
you'd
I
like.
think we got that figured out, but go ahead.
Yeah, the emergency food program is an allotment, which they're using DPS as the line item to put those monies in there if in fact it's approved, obviously. And from there, they will disperse it to Vermont Emergency Management, which will work with the 220 food shelters throughout the state of Vermont to give them those items such as, well, in case of a disaster like water and so on and so forth. MRIs, I don't think they use the food shelters, but water.
Yeah.
So DPS is just the mechanism for the pass-through on this money here. For the food
So
shelters.
during an emergency, so it would be
But they-
available.
Disaster
Yeah.
emergency.
Well, my understanding is they would buy it
Ahead of time.
so that they have it ready, because they can get
Yeah.
emergency supplies through FEMA, but that takes a couple days, so they need like water the day of.
And FEMA may not be there.
Well, there's
What
a
I've
piece
heard.
of me that says, why would we put this in base? And starting as a new program. Two, if we're seeing summer food programs go away across the state, we're seeing a reduction in grants from the federal government directly to food shelves and that. Is this exactly what, in this environment, we should be doing with base funding?
I mean, I think since it's a new program. I don't want to put it in base since it's new, we want to see how it's going, if there needs to be any changes to it.
That would be I would agree with that. And I would say in this environment, when we're seeing food programs go away across the board, where does this fit in those other wants?
Right.
What designates this as base funding? Oh, it's base
It's just in the
funding.
base.
Hello.
We're doing the base list here, and that would mean you're gonna do this every single year,
Oh.
and it's brand new.
And we
It
have,
was-
and we don't really get to hear about it because it's,
No.
the base funding is just gonna disappear.
Yeah, there was something too about complying with the government response to natural disasters, a bill from last year. Work left over from that to coordinate about food.
Yeah.
So anyway, if it's one time, that makes
Okay.
sense. But then I want to look at what's the right amount to give them to follow up on that work.
We're gonna revisit these again.
But
But I agree.
there's everything from school lunches to cuts to, summer food programs to, in ag, all the pieces that are going there. And, last week it was on the news that the feds are cutting grants directly back to food shelves.
And this morning I heard they're cutting, emergency response funding.
So I don't know where this fits, but I certainly wouldn't put it in base.
Yeah,
So it sounds like you need to move it to the one-time sheet for them to go through.
yeah, but we can still leave it open if folks
Yeah,
want to make the argument for why we keep it in base, but for now, we'll move it to one time.
Okay, so the next line is the reduction in that the House did for grants for returning veterans for, Amy, jump in if I get this.
Well, we got a memo, email from them, and I think the confusing thing is it doesn't have anything to do with returning vets, as far as I can tell. So it says grants for returning vets, but it really is for the tuition program.
Because it's a anticipated need because that's.
I guess, yeah, when they return, they'll go back to school. I think maybe that's why it was talked about returning vets, but we asked asked them about the reduction in grants for returning vets, and they said, we don't know what you're talking about. The only reduction is the $100,000 that the House took out of the tuition program for.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily grants for returning vets. Because the vets were returning, they were assuming that they were going to use $100,000 for tuition.
But shouldn't we fund that after the fact? I mean, in other words, we don't usually try to gauge how much we might spend. We pay the bill afterwards, yeah.
We anticipate how much we're gonna spend, a lot.
Well, no, but I mean, for the tuition programs, like dual enrollment and stuff like that.
But we have a budget item for those too.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, what if that need doesn't materialize?
Yeah, and they have reverted in the past quite a bit of this money, right?
I think in the I don't even know what to refer to it, the has-been budget adjustment had $100,000 reversion from the military related to, just not lower demand than anticipated in this program. So I think it is one where they set aside the anticipated amount, and then if they don't need it, they revert it.
Is this
annually.
different, because there's a tuition program for Guard members at the state colleges. Is this the same thing, or is this a different?
I don't know. We can find out.
Do you know?
It usually goes through BSAC, so
Well, I wondered if there was does the military department give them grants that are separate from the VSAC?
No,
I don't think
I
so.
think that's the program that we're talking about.
Yeah, the BSAC administers this.
Maybe we should
So should this-
rename this.
I can rename it to the returning vets tuition program. But I can find out the
They
real.
don't have to be returning, it's
Yeah.
it's just a
Vets
guard,
tuition program.
It's the guard tuition program.
and they don't have to be, they're not vets, they're guard members. The program at VSAC is for current guard members.
Right.
If there's a separate one for veterans,
I don't think there is.
we're
I
not
don't
sure
think
there
there
is.
is either.
I think we're talking about the same thing. But you're right, it's unintentionally doubly misleading.
Because of reference to veterans and returning.
Yeah,
And I think they must have an estimate on what was used last year. And the question is this the right estimate?
Right, well, and it might be that it's always been 1.3, just as a base thing. The only reason it's on the sheet is because the House reduced it by 100.
yeah,
And what they're saying is that it is the Vermont National Guard Tuition Benefit Program. This
Yeah.
is,
Which is
this is a tool that they use to, I don't know if entice is the right word, for
recruit.
recruiting efforts. It's, that's what it's used for. It's
How do you
not
say that
returning
again? The
vets.
Vermont
National Guard.
National Guard.
Benefit program.
It's the Vermont National Guard Tuition Benefit Program.
So to be clear, I'm in favor of the money. I'm just wondering when is the most reasonable time to provide it, now or the budget adjustment next year, depending on if they go under or over what they've got.
Okay, we can leave it open,
Yeah, the GA is good.
as long as they're not,
Those two things don't go together.
because I don't think they've spent the whole amount, at least in recent time.
So we'll cross that line out.
We can look into it more too.
Yeah, we'll double check that, but we'll leave that open for more discussion. Canine trainer,
Canine trainer, so that was, I understand that was agreed to. We changed the way that we were carrying the conservation district number based on the conversation that you had a couple days ago. But so this is showing in the governor's column that it's a reduction in the conservation district's grants, which is bringing it from the 612 down to 500,000. And then in the House column, it's 0 because they are not reducing the base. So it's an increase of 112,000. And then this is agreeing with the House's position on the conservation district.
okay,
Vermont Access Network funding.
I am sorry.
Yeah.
So I was confused about what was happening with conservation districts because it didn't have anything in our column.
Yes.
So,
So it's a little funky because it's restoring the base. So the governor cut 112. So if you look at the governor's column, it's a negative
Right.
112. So this is, don't cut 112, leave it as it is in the base budget.
so it just, so why doesn't that column match? Why doesn't the Senate column match the?
It's it doesn't match
it
the,
would be 612 is how much the district would get.
Give it to me.
the column right next to it is
Throw
the
away.
difference between the House and the governor.
Okay,
So the lining up is the sort of two columns.
I see.
Where it's
Okay.
0 still.
I mean, I would love to see nothing more, but I realize that may not be a thing we can do, but, would love to chat about that one. But at the very least, doing this is great.
Okay.
Great. Vermont Access Network was left in, left open was the Human Rights Commission, 2 additional positions from the pool. The Global Commitment Match is just open because that's sort of one of the last things that we closed based on the, any changes that happen within Global Commitment match needs through the end. On line 21 is the FQHC rate increase. And this, I believe, is also for our rural health centers. Line 22 is the rate increase related to the family planning code. Nolan, I can't remember what E&M stands for.
Evaluation and management.
Thank you. And this one is a 90-10 match. So this is $85,000. It draws down the total investment will be $850,000 for the rate increase. The line 23 is the match, the home and community-based 2023 rate study for the specific services covered by that study. And then line 24, this shows up in a couple places, but this is the community provider rate increases, so DAs, SSAs, adult days, homemaker services, there's a whole list of them. And we're working on a spreadsheet that breaks it out by each of those services and how much each of those services get, and then it's seen in multiple places in the budget itself.
So this is a place, I don't know, yeah, I think this is where I have questions about whether or not adult days are included in this. I think that was there was, so there's some
Yes,
concern about, where is it? Somebody says, yes, it's here, and then. it's
yeah,
not.
we're gonna pull
So-
together a spreadsheet that
Okay,
has
that would be
like
helpful.
by provider. We
Yeah.
did one last year and Maria in our office found it and
Oh, good.
we said, oh yeah, we should update that. So we
Thank
will
you.
work on that
Great.
for next week. On line 25 is the 211 increase. Line 26 is the recovery campus funding. The House did not agree with the governor on this, and they took the money out.
So, and this is, wait, which one is this? Oh, this is 1.5. This is the one that would probably need to see Grady's the language that would support it, and then maybe hear from folks about it.
But we put the House money back to where the governor's position, for now, for further decision by this committee. In line 26.1, this is moving, I don't remember what Quimby stands for, I should spell it out.
Medicare savings.
Medicaid, yeah.
Thank you. Medicare savings program.
Is there a chance that number would change, 420?
I'm not sure, we should talk to Diva about,
Because if not, I think we can close it out.
we can talk to Diva about it.
Okay.
I don't think it's 14, 16 something, but, yeah.
And I should find out if there is a match related to it.
It's funky.
Right. But I don't know if it's funky that it'll change or just, because it seemed like it's kind of a no-brainer to do.
Yeah. I think I have an email.
Okay.
Sure.
27.
Line 27, the re-engagement beds and withdrawal management. This was $1 million. The House agreed with the governor on this. Line 28 is the aftercare navigators. The House did not fund the aftercare navigators, but since we are taking the position of funding things, this has the Senate agreeing with the governor. This is still open section, so
Okay.
to be determined.
Tied to the recovery campus.
What is?
The aftercare is sort of part of that same initiative.
The navigators are tied, so like if you didn't do one, you wouldn't do the other, is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
It's part of the proposal, but it has a separate appropriation. Right, too.
Okay.
All right, so the next one is the alternatives to emergency room beds. That's been left open. The next two were in the Department of Mental Health. The governor proposed to reduce the base for the Howard Center Community Outreach and embedded clinicians in the pediatrician's office. The House position was to restore most of the base. It was a $20,000 reduction for the embedded clinicians in the pediatrician's office, as compared to the governor's position. So putting most of the money back in the base, but not quite all of it. The next line is CCFAP Childcare Financial Assistance Program caseload savings.
Mr. Chair, we have language in process, which Chair of Health and Welfare has been in consultation with me about, so we're hoping to have that language for Tuesday.
Okay. And Emily can explain how she redid this to hopefully make it easier for folks to understand, but not that it changes
Yeah.
the proposal, but just to show how the money is flowing now.
I would also,
Got a counter proposal?
no, I have an addition to theirs, there's a program called the Apprenticeship Program in childcare, and they give,
They call it the apprentice.
yep, it's the Early Childhood Education Youth Apprenticeship Program. And, that program is $156,000, and they've got about 75 youth, that are in tech centers, and they pay them $15 an hour, and they receive a stipend of $500. That's something that we have funded out of this committee, and it's mostly come out of one-time monies, and we're about 5 years into the program. And, it got zeroed out in both the governor's and the, House's budget. And if we're doing all of these things to, educate the current workforce, and this is the starting ladder in the feeder. And if you don't have any feeder, you aren't gonna have any. So, and we've been doing this now for about 5 budget years. So I would think that it might be time to say
150, is that what you said?
156. I would think it would be about time that moved into base.
Right, that's the question, whether it's one time or both.
Well, it's
I know,
been
but it's really good program.
5 years of one time, and it's probably about time.
Okay.
Was it through, do you know if it was through DCF or if it was through, we can look into it, but.
I gave the
organization.
information, the background information to Amy, and we can,
figure it out.
yep,
Line 32.
I've got the details, so.
Yeah, so we can add that, the next version. But so line 32 is projected caseload savings. So this is part of there's a consensus process between the Joint Fiscal Office and the administration to determine sort of where caseload looks like it's gonna go. The next line, line 33, this was one line with line 33.1 below it, but I've broken it out to make it clearer about what's going on in this section. So the first one, line 33, is a shift of $19 million from the general fund. So expenses from the general fund to the child care special fund, child care contribution special fund, that's what it's called. So this is the projected forecast for the payroll tax is increased over the FY 2025 assumptions. So this is a proposal to utilize the additional revenue in that fund to support the program and reduce the amount of general fund going to CCFAP.
And the language that we're coming forward with will affect all 3 of these lines.
Or really you would kind of do like the line 33.1, you would add a 33.2 and 3 where you're spending that money. I think that's the way Emily's seeing it.
Well, part of the proposal is to reject the idea of line 33 altogether.
So I guess it depends on where the money's coming from. You would keep it.
Right, so going to the general fund base amount for reductions in caseload, we don't think is the way to go. So, if we can hold open all the CCFAP stuff, I think it'll be clearer, on Tuesday.
Great. And then, so on line 33.1, this is just breaking out the rate increase that was part of the House proposal. They proposed to increase the infant and toddler rate to 4.5%. We got some feedback from the Agency of Human Services that to get to the 4.5%, we actually had to add $193,000. So in the Senate column, this reflects what the actual increase would be at 4.5%. At this point. Okay, I'll keep going. Line 34 on DCF OEO. This is the HOP program. The additional funds there. Line 35. This is conflict-free case management. Reflects $1.3 million of global commitment funds.
And there's language related to that I might want to go. I want to go back to.
Okay.
But it's not here.
Okay.
The next line, this was something that we just caught, but we were carrying, something that we thought was a global commitment appropriation, but it was not. It's actually a federal fund appropriation, so it's zeroed out everywhere, but I didn't want to take it off completely in case somebody was comparing sheets and wanted to know where it went, but it was incorrectly reflected on this sheet. We've updated the math accordingly, but so that is off. We can skip over that. I don't know if you want to close that one out since it was a technical JFO.
Yeah, we
Thing.
want to close it out.
We don't have to talk about it ever again, unless you really want to. Line 37 is the pretrial extension, and then in line 38 is the veterans home budget rebase. Those were both closed out. Go to the next page. Where we, so the agreement on care board, $300,000 for 3 additional positions to implement the AHEAD model. This was left open. Some more detail on these ones, but so an additional, 2 appropriations at the, Department of Labor for workforce expansion and the State Workforce Development Board were left open. Line 42 for the adult education funding. This is was updated by the House based on the projections from the Agency of Education to make sure they have enough funding to cover the existing program. There's also an additional $120,000 from the education fund.
Then we'd have the language in the BA. Westman, does your proposal on the adult education change the dollar amount or just changes the language?
No, it would change the way it got distributed through the formula. The dollar amounts are the same. There's, do you want me to talk about that or
No.
just, okay, good.
Just, I mean, it's not right now.
No, you just do what I want when you want.
Right after, no.
So we should look for language on that. You're not gonna change the money?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna change the money, but we'll just put the language in the way I want it.
We will talk about it later. We'll talk about it later. Okay, UVM.
UVM, BSAC, and the Vermont State Colleges, 3% increases. $1 for the Bergen Horse Farm. We added in on line 46.1, funded another $150,000 for an attorney that was discussed, I believe, for the Climate Super Fund. On line 47, the funding for the CAFO permit transition at the Department of Environmental Conservation. Line 48, additional funding for ACCD for the Dun and Bradstreet services. Line 49 and line 50 were open, additional money for economic analysis of the Department of Corrections and for the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. Those were left open. The line 51, the additional funding for the International Business Office. At ECCD, the House took out all of the funding for the International Business Office. I know there was some conversation about this amount, but right now it's just what the governor proposed. The Manufactured Home Improvement Program is still open. The House moved the funding for the VHIP program from the base to one times.
I just don't understand that,
I mean,
honestly.
It's the logic.
Such a good program.
well, I mean, moving it doesn't mean it's not a good program.
No, but it does make it come back
Every year.
every year.
Well, it hasn't been in base before, so this would be it's similar. I mean, it's not a new program. We've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
But we could.
I mean, it's been going on, it's proven itself. I mean, going back to the program for early childhood educators, very similar. It's a program that's been going on and demonstrating its value. So we can talk about that, I guess, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Line 54, the 2 GROW grants for the Department of Tourism and Marketing. The House removed the funding for those grants from the governor's budget.
Can you check on that I, think that what they did was reduce base from the year before.
Got it, yeah, they reduced the increase to the grow grants. You
No,
wanna see how-
I think, what the commissioner told me was that what they did was reduce the base. And so that would show up here differently than, that wasn't an increase. They reduced the base.
The actual base, okay. we
The
can look at
actual
that.
base. So, and I think
Did it-
that would be different for me than if it was an increase and you do that. And this is directly related, this goes out to the communities for the RDCs and the chambers to, for retention and people that are moving here. It's direct stuff to help put together a little package to say, we're gonna help move you and that sort of stuff. And if it's a reduction in the base from before, it's a little different category.
Yeah, I can look at how this is showing up, what that is, we can find out. Okay, so line 55 is the Land Access Opportunities Board. The governor had this in one time and the House moved this to the base. And all other changes, this is sort of net of everything else going on in the budget, other ups and downs. Bring it to balance. Then we have the subtotal of appropriation changes. The governor from the base had 58.52, the House was at 73.36, and this sort of summary of changes proposed here is 80.86 million. So in addition, 68, sorry. You gotta pay attention. It's Friday afternoon. Making sure you're all paying attention. So that's an additional $6.7 million. I'll move down. So highlighted in bright yellow, this is just a reminder, mostly to myself, to make sure that we update the stabilization reserve once the FY25 appropriation decisions are finalized. So depending on what happens with FY25 adjustments that were in the budget adjustment bills, where they land and what those final calculations are, that will change the calculation of the stabilization reserve. So this will be one of the last things that we do, but depending on this will be updated once final decisions are made on 25 appropriation adjustments.
So a couple of comments.
Yeah, so,
So one, we're going kind of fast, so I want to go back a little bit. Just about the, just want to flag the attorney position for A&R. May have some thoughts or language about that to bring, so just want to flag that. And then so I had mentioned serve, learn, earn, and yeah, so there, I'm hoping for one-time increase for them, but also 500 employees. So just want to make sure that was part of the mix.
okay,
Thank you.
500 for the base.
Yeah. And I think I meant to say this at the beginning and I forgot. So when we get to the one-time sheet, we tried to capture, what we could here that we were sure was base changes. And then on the one-time sheet, we have a list of other one-time adjustments and also things that we weren't sure if they were base or one-time, but they're in there. And when we get to that list, we can sort of decide if we put them on the right sheet or not, and we can put them in the right places for next week. But if serve, learn, and earn is on there, I believe.
And, okay, great. And then there's, I did get some updated information from A&R about if they were to get new positions, what would be useful to them. So I may have some further.
So we keep going.
Yeah.
So on line 63, this is where we go into the other bills. So these are the H bill, H91, I believe is currently in Health and Human Services. This is the bill related to emergency housing. That House had appropriated $10 million in that bill. That is an open item. S126, the healthcare bill, has a $2.8 million general fund impact plus some money from the HIT fund and Green Mountain Care Board bill back. that would be necessary to implement that bill. And then S-125, related to compensation and collective bargaining rights. Also had two positions at the labor board. I believe those appropriations were stripped out for decisions as part of the budget compensation.
And then like other bills, like 127.
Can't remember if those are on the, we have other bills on the other sheet
Oh,
as
okay,
well.
that's probably why.
Yeah, so we have some other bills on the one-time sheet.
Okay, that's where it is, okay.
But yeah, so the last couple pieces that are open on the base sheet, so the direct applications, which, most of those transfers are, like the transfers in the Department of Financial Regulation, liquor control, sports wagering, unclaimed property, settlements from the Attorney General.
Is that on this sheet?
No, those are on a separate sheet.
Okay.
Which I can pass out early next week if that works, but those are, what those estimates are. Usually what we will do at this point in the budget process is double check in with those agencies and departments to see if they have any updates on what those amounts should be.
So the 102 million is open because it might change.
Yeah, and then same with the transfer from the cannabis fund, if there are any changes there.
Okay.
And then finally, the House had assumed $13.5 million of tax credits. It is still pending, nothing has come out of the House that I am aware of at this point related to those tax credits, but at this point, we're holding the same amount of money in the Senate construct as in the House construct for tax credits. So when all is said and done, this brings the amount that the Senate has available in base funds for one-time appropriations to 37 million, which is about $10.5 million less from the House position.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, it's nice until you get to the one-time ones, because that's less money, right?
So I don't know if it makes sense. I can hand out the one-time sheet. I don't know if you want to take a break. If I look at the schedule behind me, we're 15 minutes over where we're supposed to be, so.
I'd rather, unless people really want to, I'd rather do both sheets and then take a break.
Great. I can go. They already told me I was going fast. I can go.
Okay.
I can go that
I'm supposed to
super
be more
fast, or I
smart in an hour.
Turn it up.
Yeah.
I think we won't make any decisions, so we'll look at this again. Because I think also the pro tem's got us.
I'm gonna take the sheet and I'll have to. I'll yell at you if it's not.
Okay, we'll just cut everything else.
If it's not right, I'll yell at
Be careful.
you.
Westman's asks are
Oh, this is
for
an
grant.
Do you want the extra
I've got
back?
one more child here, Pat, so,
Oh.
you
How
can cut that.
you?
We'll see who you have to deal with.
Joan, the enforcer.
Okay.
All right. So maybe for the sake of time, what I'll do, I won't go through everything line by line, because I think I'm pretty familiar with most of these things. I'll flag the ones that I think are
Do
important.
the colors
to flag.
mean anything?
What do the colors mean? The yellow, then bright yellow is the 37.17 should match the 37.17 on the bottom of the previous sheet in terms of the base funding available for one-time appropriations.
Yeah.
And the 136 is highlighted because that is going to change potentially depending on what the FY25 position looks like. So if you'll recall, the sort of the construct at this point is the assumption that there's the House's construct, the governor's construct would then be over $130 million from FY25 carried forward into FY26 available for appropriations. So I won't go through in detail, same deal, the sort of yellowy orange color are the ones that are open or that haven't been talked about as being closed. The blue sections were ones that were flagged as possibly being moved to the base. So the first one is the urban search and rescue funds. I know there had been some discussion about whether or not that should be in the base or not. So we've highlighted it in blue just to flag it for everybody. And then the same thing if we go down to VHIP. We just talked about on the previous sheet, sort of an open question on
So that money is in there twice.
It is a 0 on the, oh no, maybe it isn't twice. How did I do it? Yeah, it's in there twice. It's all right. So perfect. You just found
$4 million.
$4 million. Great.
Andy gets the first million.
Yeah.
Find your seat.
The,
Richie's gone, so you would have spent that already.
Sorry, Rich.
yeah. On line 31, so on line 22, related to the bridge payment, I have a note just about adding language about not owing $1.5 million in savings. I believe this was language that was in the budget bill last year. There was a request to have it repeated this year. So we will find that language.
As we're passing over
Oh,
it,
yeah,
so
sorry.
the PCB testing and the PCB remediation we had held open.
Yeah, if they're colored, they're still.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And I should say the same thing, right? So if they are, a good example is this PCB testing. So that one we put back at the governor's recommended number. So this is like, I don't want to say this is the worst case scenario, but this is the, like, if you spend
Highest cost center.
highest sort of cost position based on sort of what we have at this point. So like that, PCB testing has the governor's recommended it.
And
Another one
where's remediation?
that is gonna be further down in, DC on line, no, it's not. Oh, remediation is funky because it is a transfer to the environmental contingency fund. So it's on the bottom
Gotcha.
of this sheet.
Okay.
So yeah, so if we, on like line 4, Ideal Vermont, the House didn't fund, but the governor did, so that's in at the governor's position. Municipal technical assistance for $3 million, the House didn't fund it, but the governor did, so it's in at the governor's position.
So is the PCB isn't on here? It's on the other sheets, on the
It's on the-
transfer sheet?
It's at the
It's on the
bottom
other
of that
side.
sheet.
This sheet?
It's,
Other
yeah,
side
flip
toward
it
the
over
bottom.
at the very bottom, there's a transfer to the environmental contingency fund.
79.
That's the money for the EC's remediation.
We're
That's a very.
restoring it back.
To the
To
government.
governor's recommendation. Yeah.
79,
Yeah, neat.
two environmental
Yeah.
contingencies.
So if it's
There you
not
go.
highlighted, then it's
I do
closed.
want to ask. Done the one.
We haven't gotten any of those.
Are there any
Yeah, I
other
know.
lines you want to?
Can they use it
Oh,
all
on
in 1 year?
line
My question.
31.
Because that is,
So we have,
Conceivably.
Wait,
we have,
Emily's telling me.
Go ahead.
No, it's all good. Line
PCBs on the
31,
other side, too.
there was discussion about a Montpelier
Line 14
housing
is
study
also
for $100,000. That's been added in,
oh, yes.
at this point.
Yeah, that's the test.
Yeah.
as its own line.
It's in
It's
the,
added to the
it's
two
added to the
million.
200,000 in line 31.
Okay, great.
On line 41, the, cash crop, nope, crop cash, because they're two different programs. Crop cash, the House had it in at 300,000, this adds an additional $100,000 to that program.
What, sorry, what line is that?
Sorry, 41, the very bottom.
41,
Because I thought the letter was they wanted
500.
hold the 300 and then add 200 for the crop cash plus.
We can tweak that.
I think you heard 100 from me,
Uh-oh,
and since then,
it's
we
now
heard
250.
200 from, additional from
And was your 200 for the crop?
Cash Plus.
Plus.
Okay.
Good.
Okay,
So that would still be a 300 and then it'd be 200 for the plus.
okay, so I'll add a line 200K for crop cash
Or-
plus.
Premium.
Okay. We can add that in. Okay, so then if you go to the next page, the next line that has changed, in line 48, Advanced Vermont, the Department of Labor, we added $150,000 to that line based on the conversations that you have been having. And then the sort of next,
We also struck 47, that money. That's different from.
oh yeah, sorry. The mileage-based user fee, I should add a note to that.
That won't. You could
You know
just,
how much we went out in this, I have.
The removal of the $1 million from mileage-based user fee implementation that was added by the House.
AOT thinks they're getting a federal grant for that.
Okay, So then from line 50 down to 63, these are some additional asks that Amy and I were able to put together. So we have the 750,000 for the cancer center, primary care Maple Mountain services. We had there was a request for this, but we didn't have the amount.
15.
General
What is it?
fund or local fund?
I think it's, yeah.
Okay.
So some of these, the Senate Health and Welfare is working on for early next week.
What did you think the dollar amount was?
515,000.
We can add that in. Another $500,000 for nursing home staff incentives. I believe it's similar to the language that was in last year's budget.
No, Westman's not here to defend it.
I think it's a great idea.
No, it isn't.
$500,000, and this one is flagging the parent-child center conversation. We flagged that there's no money in the tobacco fund. I know there's some conversations about potentially redirecting tobacco fund, but this is just held here as a placeholder for now. For the medical transports, $1 million. For the treasurer's climate superfund modeling and a limited service position, $830,000. I might be rounded. And that at the Agency of Natural Resources, contracted services for the climate superfund, $500,000. There was conversation about bringing the total for the conservation districts up to $3 million. So this 2.4 million is taking the 612, this is less the 612 that's already in the base, and bringing it to a total of 3. Line 58 is the Serve, Earn, and Learn program. This is $500,000 in one-time funds. And I can't remember if they already have $500,000 in the base. So it would bring it to $1 million total.
I think that's what it is.
They were asking for 1.5 or
the line 59 is the St. Albans building purchase for recovery residents for $250,000. Line 60 is funding to go directly to local food shelves, $1 million. And line 61, we probably should have put this with the bills below, but $397 for community radio stations for $200,000.
That would be Department of Public Service.
Got it, thank you.
It's a longer session, I want to take that out.
We would just eliminate that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Will you?
Right, this is,
But then if we take it out and there is a longer session, you don't get paid.
Sorry, I won't be coming.
For the skeleton crew.
that is, yeah, that's just a placeholder that can come off if it is not needed.
But it is interesting to note that it's 300,000 a week.
And then line 60, I think we skipped over this, but line 62, money at the Secretary of State's office for local civics, that's about $50,000. So those are all of the one-time appropriations, both that were in the House, governors in the House, and then what's been talked about in this committee so far. And then below that, we have the bills with one-time appropriations. So the House has H 472. This is a lot of times with the Secretary of State's office, when there is a new profession that's being regulated, we have to front load the startup, and then going forward, the program is funded with the fees of the program. So this is the $170,000 to start the mental health professional licensing. The S-126, the healthcare bill. This one may also be on there twice. I can't remember if it was.
It is.
It is on there twice. Great.
It's a mix.
It's a mix of one-time and ongoing.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can work on it.
Perfect. So this is the one-time fund for that. The medical jet relief bill, which is currently uses $1 million from the debt retirement appropriation. So this is probably a good time to flag. The House used $10 million of the debt retirement appropriation in their budget, leaving $10 million of that appropriation. Since neither of the budget adjustments have gone forward, that money, well, there's still some money sitting for debt retirement with the treasurer's office. This $1 million though would reduce that to $9 million. Line 69 is S60, the farm security grants required for that bill. In S56, there were per diems related to the New Americans office. S53 is the prenatal doulas program. This is the same situation, $25,000 for OPR to establish the certificate program for one-times. We don't have an amount for S122 or S127, the economic development or the housing bill. We are working on sort of going through sort of a side-by-side between what was in each of those bills and what's in the budget as passed by the House. And if there's a delta, we'll put that in here and we'll figure out a way to flag it. So then after that, we go down to the transfers. So we have the $77 million going to the education fund. There's the money going to the computer information technology fund for the ADS billing model change. This was.
Can I ask, on the education fund transfer? So I understand this is money to buy down the property tax. And I had, in the House bill, seemed like there was 117, and I understand that to be, there's 77 here, and then there's 40.
In the education fund.
Yeah.
So where does that show up?
So that is in the best place to find it would be on the education fund outlook. If you look at the projected year-end balance in FY25, there's unreserved and unallocated funds. And typically what happens if there's projected unreserved and unallocated, those funds are utilized in the next fiscal year.
Got it. Okay.
So that's all of the one-time funds are this plus that.
So this 77.2 brings us up to what the House roughly did in terms of overall.
Yes.
Got it.
So yeah, 78, the computer technology modernization fund, the governor requested 15 million, the House reduced it by 5. This puts it back at the governor's recommend. This was in their letter of requests. Line 79, this is the environmental contingency fund. So this would transfer general funds into the environmental contingency fund for DEC to use for remediation and testing. So it was a $4 million reduction. The cash fund transfer, so the House Corrections and Institutions Committee and the and the House Appropriations Committee worked out that they would reduce the amount that was being transferred to the cash fund by $7 million. Part of that was there's a $2 million appropriation above to the for housing development. So that was sort of House Corrections and Institutions did not want that in the cash fund. They wanted it in the general fund. So they gave the money for it sort of back from the cash fund, and then the appropriation is not happening out of the cash fund. Some of the rest of that, we can go through a little spreadsheet on the cash fund next week.
And I'm still meeting with the chair of the institution about it.
And then finally on line 81, there was a transfer of general funds to the domestic and sexual violence special fund as a one-time. So if we take into account all of the proposed changes in the base and the proposed changes in one-time funds, sort of operating under both the additional asks as well from what we've got so far as additional asks plus sort of moving some things to the governor's position if they were higher, there is a $60 million difference between revenue and spending.
Before we talk, we're negative 60 million. You need, for this to balance, you have to cut 60 million. There were those two things that were twice. So maybe it's more like 55 million, but we also had a couple things that people wanted to add that are on here, so.
Right, and we have, and all of the economic development and other bills haven't been added in on the House side.
No, well, yeah, because they reduced the revenue by the 13 million, so that is accounted for in that.
Okay. Can I ask a question about?
No, after I ask,
okay.
so I don't forget. Norris, did you get any information about the domestic and sexual violence fund, about where it goes? About the issue between the two entities?
Yes and no.
Okay. Well,
We can, we can talk about it and then make that information public.
Okay. Senator Lyons?
No, the only question I had was trying to remember what the reduction to the PCB testing and remediation means.
It's a mystery that I tend to unwrap.
Okay, thank
Do
you.
you mean why they did it?
I want to know what it means for testing and remediation, on what effect it has, and, or is it the,
Well, we went,
Do you mean
this
the
sheet
cuts?
says we're going with the governor, so there wouldn't be a reduction, but the House reduced it by 4%.
The reduction in the testing, I understand now, which is that
Yeah.
it slowed testing itself to a crawl. So, but the question for me is, the House's position for the last 5 years, or since the discovery of the PCBs in Burlington, was that we didn't want to burden districts with remediation. So if the state was going to mandate testing, the state had to come up with big bucks. And they've always criticized how much we have for remediation. So the mystery is, here they've cut remediation from the governor's recommend in half, which is completely counter to the position that they've had all along. And I don't understand why they would do that when we're definitely gonna spend the governor's recommend before we're done, so.
So we had heard that there was, well, I would interpret it as that there was some confusion about whether or not there were projects in line ready to go for that money. But we did get a memo from Matt Chapman about basically confirming that, yes, there's actually more projects to be done than
money available?
than the money that even the governor is recommending.
Right.
And so,
That's what I don't get.
I mean, yeah, and I think there was, I think there was just a misunderstanding, that my interpretation is there was a misunderstanding there, but
And I think it's deeper and more nefarious.
could be. I mean, we can talk about what my
Emily, on
perception
the-
of that, but.
Because PCB testing is listed in both items. I don't know if on line 79, how much testing is, because I thought that, is the testing on line 13 only for new schools? And the testing on 79 is for those that had remediation where they retest?
That's my guess, is that it's they go in and test initially, then they remediate, then they gotta test again to make sure the remediation worked.
So on the line 13, what is that testing?
I think that might be the first test, but I will find out.
Because I didn't know if they were doing new testing. I thought they halted testing new schools.
I'm not sure, and I know that there's, part of it is DEC and the Department of Health partner
Right.
doing it.
So this is VDH and then the other one is DEC.
Yeah.
Maybe they have their own cost separate. Okay, Senator Norris?
Yeah, what I can tell you basically on line 81, the domestic and sexual violence special fund is from the House, the $450,000 was earmarked for the network, from what I understand. And then in my meeting with my contact up there, he says, well, maybe so we should think about changing that somewhat because it generally goes through the Vermont Crime Service, Victim Service, and then they allocate those monies through grants or whatever else. So I'm gonna have to meet again with representatives from the House as to what they were thinking about when they did that.
Okay.
But they're both short, like everybody else,
Yeah.
of funding, so.
So how much money do we have totally in the budget for housing, additional housing? Because the EHCB has 5 million. And I'm just, every time I hear testimony in my committee, whether it's about, well, the homeless population, that's pretty obvious, but any other areas of healthcare, we consistently hear about housing and how important it is to increase the access to housing, whether it's lower affordable, middle income.
I think we've got about 45 million.
Is that what it is? No, just
We can pull
wondering.
a
But
sheet
that's not
together.
including the GA.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
she,
not including GA, right.
We can pull a sheet together that has, and then I think that would be part of the, I can't remember what the housing bill number, S127, sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of what's in the budget versus.
okay, so you also have to leave pretty soon to pro tem, right?
I do.
So we'll start running out of senators here. So the goal is to take all this information, these two sheets that we went over, find out what is not on here that you want to be on here. So that's the first thing. Like, are there any things that we didn't take, like the server and learn didn't get on here, we'll add that. But we need to stop expanding our list, and then we'll have to cut $60 million.
Yeah,
So your task is to not only see, oh, you didn't get XYZ on here, but then you'll have to start thinking, if you had to cut 60 million from this list, what would you cut?
which is about 8.5 million a person.
Or somebody can cut 16.
You can cut 60.
Well, Weston's not here.
Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah.
I have a separate question.
Yeah.
Anticipating that there may be more bills that come in that have money
Yeah.
associated with them, and so then, I mean, I'm just thinking about other bills that thinking about, hoping
Might
make
have
it,
a bill.
may
Yeah.
make it across the finish line. So should we find did you say 60 million? That we need to cut out of this?
Yeah.
Exciting.
And so you could cut more and then leave money for other bills. And I think we've done that in the past, and we've also known, I haven't received information from all the chairs yet. Maybe some of them aren't gonna send anything, but I know like economic development, wanted to prioritize, and they also have a new bill on workforce development, so they might wanna
Right.
add things in here.
So keep that in mind as we are finding.
Yeah, if you have, because, yeah, if there's a bill out there, we could add it to here, even if it hasn't passed. I mean, none of these bills have passed. So we could add it in here, just have it on the sheet, and so we don't forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I have in my head right now is S29, the chloride contamination
Oh, yeah.
reduction bill. Don't know what's gonna happen with that.
That's different from the one we have in judicial.
Sorry, say again?
The one we have in judicial?
Yes.
Is it that bill?
It's that bill.
Okay.
Yeah, and don't know if there's a path.
It's like
It's gonna
100,
cost them money.
Oh, okay.
Is it
There
like-
we
Salt bill.
go.
there's some money in it. 100.
There's like 254, contracting, and then I think there's a position associated with that with A&R.
Okay. So the goal was to finish this by next week. If we get stuff from the committees, late, if it's
Tuesday.
difficult, we'll have to
Sorry, finish what by next?
finish the bill by next week.
Oh.
That was the original goal, pass it up by the 18th. But given all the other bills and committees' work they're doing, I don't know if we'll make that, but it would be good if we kind of wrapped up our work by that time, and then it's just like, okay, how are we gonna take input from the other committees or other bills? Or all these people that sit around the room that wanna weigh in. So that'll happen next week. And then we also, next week, we will have to close out the language sections that were left open, but some of those will depend on what we put in here. And then also, we have a bunch of stuff from the BAA that we're gonna put in here. So we have to kind of go through that. Maybe we don't wanna put everything in the BAA in here. There might be things that we don't think has changed, or we no longer care about it or something. So we'll have to spend some time going through the BAA and saying, okay, let's keep this in or not. And there's, some of that money got in here, but not all of it, not.
That was gonna be my question, because if we're thinking about, so is the money that was going to be in the BAA already included
Some
As
of, I mean, the
revenue.
revenues are in, but
revenues?
so like the 1.8 for the towns, for
Mhm.
floods, that's in here.
Right, so it's kind of a mix.
Some of the, yeah, there are some, and I can't think of other ones that my big dollar amounts that was in the BA that's not.
Originally, we had 1.8 for GA, then we pulled that in the second one.
Well, we had we had 8 million for VHCB in the BA.
Yeah.
And we put
Okay.
that back in. We had a lot of stuff that was from the governor's recommend BAA about debt capitalization payments and things like that, and service level agreement, true ups and all that stuff. So that's the fund that JFO has to do, is try to figure out all that about putting it into the budget.
At what point do you think we'll have we'll have language to look at? In regards to what's coming over from the VA into this.
I don't know,
Whenever you would want it, we can get it ready.
okay. So, let's see, next week. But I would assume we would maybe want to start looking at it on Wednesday so that we can consider all the different parts. But I don't think it's too long, because we've passed this twice before. We put it all in there, and then we took it all out, so
Yeah.
we won't have a lot of questions about what it is, but we'll have to make decisions on what we want to keep in and what we don't. Okay, so we will adjourn